First of all, an apology to those of you coming here for my usual maths videos. This video is going to be a little bit different, but I would say that it's equally important, if not more important than the usual videos that I make. So I'd really appreciate if you stick around until the end. I want to make sure that people are properly informed about the deceitful practices that continue to happen in the world of education. In this video, I'm going to run through some of the lies and misinformation that you're told by companies to try and get you to pay for their products and services. I will provide concrete evidence and facts so that you can see straight through them. These problems largely exist due to the rise of social media. It's made it easier than ever to access learning, which is a great thing. When I was in school, you pretty much relied on a textbook and your teacher. We didn't have access to thousands of videos and resources. This is also great, but comes at a cost. Pretty much anyone with a phone these days is able to call themselves a teacher, even if they've had no formal training. And every day I see videos sharing either completely wrong or dubious statements that are designed to exploit students, who are often children, for financial gain. It doesn't stop there either. There's also been a rapid rise in study influencers giving out advice. Some of this is also incredible, but many of them eventually begin to push poor quality services because they get paid to say it's good, when in reality, it's not at all. It makes me angry that people would do this, but unfortunately money makes people do all sorts of things. So let's get stuck in. First of all, I want to look at the so-called 5-year rule. This is actually something that's relatively new, but it's being pushed incredibly hard this year to try and make students believe that people have the power to predict papers. I'm going to show you absolute proof that this is not a thing, including statements directly from Ofqual, AQA, and Edexcel themselves. A side note here, last year I made a video about why you shouldn't buy predicted papers. All of the information in this video still applies, so why not check it out after you've watched this video? I'll put a link in this video's description. So just in case you aren't aware, the so-called 5-year rule is a suggestion that exam boards must cover all of the content within a 5-year period. So if there's something that hasn't come up in the last 4 years, the idea is it will definitely come up this year. Predicted paper makers will tell you that they've spent thousands of hours working out which these topics are going to be, and that if you're prepared to pay them, you can access a paper that goes over these topics. So where's all of this come from? Well, it stems from a sentence buried in a web page on the AQA website. It's worth noting that no other exam boards actually mention this at all, but it doesn't stop creators pretending it applies to all of them. Here we see them saying it applies to Edexcel, IGCSE, regular Edexcel, and OCR as well, but there's absolutely nothing on any of these websites to back this up. Now if you actually go to the website rather than reading the Google summary here, you'll see that this text comes from a transcript of a video that AQA uploaded in 2014. This video is still available on their YouTube channel now. In fact, it was the first video that the AQA account ever uploaded. This video is so incredibly old that it was actually made before the current specifications were even written. This should set off alarm bells. And if we take a closer look at the video's description, it even says that all of the information on assessments was correct at the time of recording, so in 2014. For the latest information for your subject, please visit the AQA website. This is an incredibly relevant point, as we'll find out in a moment. So what do we know so far about this 5-year rule? Well, firstly, it doesn't seem to apply to any exam board that's not AQA, and even if it does apply to AQA, it was mentioned in a video that's very old, and in fact the video itself states that it might be out of date by now. Now of course you shouldn't just believe anything that I say either, I could be completely wrong too. But I've done something simple and obvious that these creators have failed to do. I contacted the exam boards directly to find out exactly what they said. Let's start by looking at the exam board in question, AQA, and their response to me. Hello Tom, that's me. For our maths assessments, there are indeed rules regarding the specification coverage. I can confirm that these are according to number of cycles rather than years, but I'm not able to say how many cycles. This information is not in the public domain. And in fact, it's also kept from me to ensure I don't accidentally disclose it. So this is from Robin Harris, the Subject Support Manager for Maths at AQA. He's saying that there are rules around specification coverage linked to cycles, but this is not publicly available, as in no one knows what it is. In fact, he doesn't even know what it is. He goes on to say, so the 5-year rule is certainly not universally true, and there are different rules for other subjects, which again we won't disclose publicly. He also says he's going to report the video that I mentioned to his media team, as they wouldn't want anyone using it to sell resources to students under false pretensions. And he finishes by saying that he hopes that I can understand why he's not able to say any more. So the specific rules around specification coverage in exams is closely guarded within exam boards, so much so that their own subject support managers don't even know the rules themselves. But that doesn't stop those random people on TikTok trying to sell you papers based on a rule that doesn't even exist. Now, rather interestingly, since I contacted AQA, and in the process of making this video, I've noticed they've made some changes to their website. Remember that webpage that people keep screenshotting as their evidence of the 5-year rule? Well, AQA have removed it. If you go to this page now, or click any of the links that these people have sent to you before, this page is no longer found. You can make your own mind up on why this might be, but based on the evidence I've shown you so far, I'd suggest that this probably wasn't a rule at all, and was simply an old webpage that AQA had forgot to update. Next, let's take a look at what Edexcel said. They say that the complete specification at both tiers needs to be covered in as few series as possible. And that I should note that the wording says the coverage should be in as few series as possible, however it does not specify a set number of series or years. So no mention of 5 years at all, and anyone who knows anything about the maths specification, for example qualified maths teachers, will tell you that you can definitely assess it in a few series. You don't need 5. But that didn't stop these creators telling you that it applied to Edexcel as well, and it didn't even apply to AQA anyway. This information is also backed up on Edexcel's own website, if you know where to look. So we've seen the responses from AQA and Edexcel that clearly show that there is no such thing as a 5-year rule. What about Ofqual? Ofqual are a government organisation that set out rules for exam boards about how they must conduct examinations. They have this document here relating to mathematics. It was written in 2017. You'll note in line with the date of your current specifications. You can find it here. In this document at point 16 it says this. The key thing to note here is it confirms what the exam boards had said. It's in as few successive assessment series as possible. But even more interestingly, they say they need to achieve this in such a way that the content being targeted in a given assessment series is not unduly predictable. What this means is that Ofqual tell exam boards that when they're sampling questions to form an exam paper, they must do it in such a way that means it's not predictable. Yet these creators still tell you that there are topics that are guaranteed to come up this year, as long as you pay them, of course. Now let's just entertain this idea for a moment and pretend for a second that there is a 5-year rule, and it does apply, because after all they've done thousands of hours of research and preparation to write these papers which are guaranteed to improve your grade, because they're the best predicted papers ever. Well, I've gone through this whole process anyway, and I'm not going to gatekeep that information from you, or make you pay for it. Before I do that though, I need to return to a point made by both exam boards in their email replies to me. Firstly, from AQA, I am also able to confirm that the coverage is tracked at specification reference level rather than using any subtopics. And Edexcel say something similar. Each specification point must be assessed, but this does not require the assessment of every example listed within that specification point. Now, if you're not a teacher, this might not be so easy to understand, so let me break it down for you. The math specification is split up into the following 97 specification points. Many of these specification points are actually very long statements that cover many different topics. Take S2 for example. This specification point says the following. You can see within this there are many different topics. So for example, if an exam paper had you to construct a pie chart, like this question here, then this specification reference would be considered assessed. This means that all of the other topics mentioned in this specification point don't need to appear at all. So that would mean we don't need to see a frequency table, a bar chart, a pictogram, a vertical line chart, or a line graph. In fact, if they wanted to, the exam board could just ask you to construct a pie chart every few years and never do any of those other topics. So the idea that you, say, haven't seen a pictogram for the last 5 years means one's guaranteed to come up is certainly not true. So as promised, I'll show you which of these points were not assessed in the last few years. We can do this because after each exam, the exam boards produce a list of all of the topics and their specification references for us. So, if we return to the original specification references, and I'm going to look at AQA Foundation for this one. That means first of all, I need to remove any of the references that are higher only. That's these ones here. So if we go to the most recent exam series and remove the topics that were on paper 1, it looks like this. Remove those from paper 2, it looks like this. And remove those from paper 3, and it looks like this. Even in one exam series, most of the specification points have already been assessed. What about if we go back a second series, or a second year if your subject is assessed in that way? Well, if we go back one more series and remove the points from paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3, it looks like this. And you can probably guess what happens if we go back a third series: paper 1, paper 2, paper 3. So you can forget about the 5-year rule because the entire specification was assessed clearly in the last 3 series, not the last 5. This leads us to one fairly obvious question. If we're to believe that people have gone back over the last 4 series of exams, found all of the content that hasn't been assessed, and then written a paper on that, what's in that paper? Because technically, it should be completely empty. So why has this happened? Well, I can think of 2 possible explanations. The first is, the people making these claims to you don't really know what they're doing. Perhaps they believe there is a 5-year rule, perhaps they believe it applies to every single topic in the course. Maybe they genuinely believe that what they're doing is correct. Therefore, they have ended up with some topics that they think are guaranteed to come up, they're just misinformed, possibly because they lack experience and aren't actually teachers. The second option is they do know what they're doing. They have ended up with the same results I have, but they're just lying to you about it because they want you to buy their product. Either way, take it from me, there's no such thing as a 5-year rule, and there's no topics that are guaranteed to come up this year. Now you might be thinking to yourself, does it even really matter? They're producing a material that you can use to help you prepare for your exams. And they do seem to claim that they are quite accurate in predicting these papers. The figure that seems to be quoted the most is up to 70% accuracy. Of course, you've got no way of verifying this because you can't see their previous papers, unless you buy them, of course. But is 70% actually any good? Well, it turns out it's not actually that good at all, and I'll demonstrate that to you now. I've created a tool that anybody can use to see how good they are at predicting the topics that have come up in past maths exams. Let's give it a try and see how close we can get to 70%. The first thing we're going to do is click up here and select an exam series. I'm going to go for June 2022. This now tells us that there are 67 topics that we need to select, because there were 67 topics assessed in that year. Down below you'll see some information that's also freely available on my website. It's all of the topics as I've grouped them, and the percentage of times they've come up in past exams. So we need to check boxes down this column here until we've selected 67 topics. The most logical thing to do is select the 67 topics with the highest percentages. So let's go ahead and sort these so we have the highest ones at the top, and let's go down and select the top 67 most frequently occurring topics. And there we have it. So I've selected 67 topics with high percentages. I wonder how accurate I was. Well, let's go and have a look. If I unhide these cells here, it reveals the accuracy. My accuracy was 79%. Who would have thought? Just by picking the topics that come up most frequently in past exams, I've done an even better job than the people that use the 5-year rule, even though they spent thousands of hours doing analysis. You can play around with this, and no matter what you do, as long as you pick the most common topics, you will always get higher than 70%. Perhaps even more interestingly, if you randomly pick topics, you tend to get roughly half of the questions correct. I've made this so that if I press one button, the topics will be randomly selected. Let's have a look and see what happens. So it got 48% by randomly guessing 67 topics this time. This time it also got 48. This time 55, 51, 54, 55, 52. So even if you select these topics completely at random, you're bound to get about half right. And this makes a lot of sense because of what we saw before. In most years, most of the specification is assessed. There are no secret topics that are guaranteed to come up, because in most years, most topics make an appearance. This also means you shouldn't be fooled by claims that previous questions were predicted. For example, if I said last year standard form was going to come up, and I show you my question, and then I show you a question from the exam that was really similar, that makes it look like I was amazing at predicting. But actually standard form has come up 93% of the time in the past, and it's usually assessed in the same sort of way. So it doesn't take any sort of genius to suggest that it might well come up again. The final things I want to look at in this video are the ideas of credibility and trust. Since there's so much information available on the internet these days, it can be difficult to navigate and know what's reliable and what isn't. When you're watching or reading about something online related to learning, I want you to consider the following 3 points. The first point is there money involved? Now, this doesn't mean that people charging money are doing the wrong thing or are not credible. In fact, there are many excellent services that you do have to pay for. But if someone stands to benefit financially from the information they're giving you, you should definitely always question it. The second thing is, are they qualified? I'm talking about comments like this one here. You sure this is legit, bro? And then the creator says, pretty sure we're teachers. Well, you only get to call yourself a teacher if you've got one of these. And one of their team members is a former head of exams at Edexcel. Now, that makes it sound like they're in charge of all exams at Edexcel, which I can assure you certainly is not and was never the case. If anything, the people I would put most trust in are your actual class teachers at your school. If you want to get any opinions on whether something's good or not for your studies, they'd be the first person I go and ask. And the final thing to consider is that popularity is not the same as legitimacy. Like this comment here. A user says, "How do we know it's legit?" And the response from the creator is, "We have 110,000 followers and 3 million likes." Having lots of followers and likes doesn't mean your opinions or ideas are any more valid than anybody else's. There are plenty of people in the world that have lots of followers that are perhaps questionable characters. For example, this guy. And even the Pied Piper had lots of followers, and that didn't end well at all. Unfortunately, some people think that because they've got lots of followers, they also must be correct. And then you end up in a situation like this, where they claim that they're educating teachers about a 5-year rule that doesn't even exist. It makes them look silly. I started the video with this quotation here, and I hope you can take some meaning from it. People are often driven by their emotions, and I understand why people might end up making mistakes in paying for things that aren't as good as they seemed. With exams, this is mainly because people just want to be successful, and I find this really unfair that people would play on your emotions like that. When something sounds too good to be true though, it often is. I'm going to end the video with a message to those creators making these resources misleading and false statements. I do hope you're watching, and whilst this video isn't for you, I do hope that this makes you think and make some changes. But I'm not too optimistic that this will happen, so I'll leave you with this message.